Good morning, and I hope everyone had a really informative and inspiring sessions yesterday. And who made it to the Cayley last night? You people. I think a lot of us hit brick wall in that wonderful drinks reception at the museum. But I want to extend another very warm thank you to our host. So welcome to those of you who are online with us as well. My name is Natalie Urquhart, and I'm a project advisor on the Shared Island Stories project. It's a pleasure to welcome you today to our panel on collective memory and difficult knowledge, where we will hear 4 presentations and then move into our Q&A. I'm going to briefly introduce our 4 panelists in order of presentation, and their full biographies and papers, of course, are available in your handbook. First, we will have Dr. Heather Cateau, who is a visiting senior research fellow working on the Shared Island Stories project at the School of Art History at the University of St Andrews. Her substantive position is as senior lecturer in Caribbean history at the University of the West Indies, St Augustine campus, where she has also held the positions of Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Education, Head of History Department, and University Dean. Her research focus involves a revisionary approach to plantation and enslavement systems in the Caribbean, and her fellowship explores the connections between the Caribbean and Scotland, with a special concentration on past connections among our island communities. Our second panelist is Henry Richard Harding, a curator and researcher specializing in the history of the Arabian Peninsula. Having previously worked on several large museum projects across the region, Mr. Harding currently works for the Department of Culture and Tourism in Abu Dhabi. He was the leading curatorial researcher and curator for the refurbishing of the Dell Museum, which he will speak about today. His research focuses on maritime history of the region, including linkages to the Indian Ocean trading systems and ethnography arising from these influences, and how collections in Arabia are developed in a post-colonial context. Chun Su is a first-year student at the Research Laboratory doctoral program at the National School of Architecture and Landscape in Lille, France, where she specializes in aesthetics and contemporary art theory. Chun's research investigates the impact of landscape and the natural environments on the commemoration and remembrance of the White Terror in Taiwan, with a focus on Green Island. She seeks to explore the possibility of alternative forms of commemoration that do not rely on monuments, and in particular, how Green Island has taken hold of the island's historical and political imaginaries. Joining us online today is our 4th panelist, Dr. Immaculada Real Lopez, who is a professor in the Department of Art History at the Complutense University of Madrid and academic secretary of the Master of Historical Artistic Heritage of the university. She's an author of several large number of books and research articles, and is also curator of exhibitions, the most recent of which is at the Reina Sofia Museum in Spain. Dr. Lopez's paper is titled Curacao and Slavery in the Caribbean, from Memorial Heritage to the Museumization of Modern Identities. We will ask that we save our Q&A to the end, where we hope to have time for a short panel discussion, and I will be delighted to invite Dr. Cateau to start. Thank you.
Morning. As you heard, I am part of a project. The name of the project is Shared Island Stories, Scotland and the Caribbean. It is funded by the UK Research and Innovation Fund. And I have been here for about 1 year and 4 months, looking at the past 17th, 18th, and 19th century and the relationship between Scotland and the Caribbean, with special emphasis on the islands and the Highlands. I want to share with you some of my conclusions this morning and to show how I've gotten to this point in my research. I want to suggest that we may have 2 revised narratives. I call them the narrative of hidden profits and the narrative of the working and the middle class. The first one, hidden profits, involves looking at that profitability debate again, moving away from the windfalls made by large planters and merchants, and looking at smaller towns, which connected families in Scotland and the Caribbean in important and impactful ways. The other narrative, the narrative of the working class, again is part of that shift from the big planters and the merchants to look at a wider cross-section, a cross-section of young men from low-income groups who embrace the Caribbean as a way of shaping new lives. I am from the island, Twin Island, Trinidad and Tobago, and this is the Highlands in Tobago. This is Speyside in Tobago. And just to show that I'm not biased, I have an example from Jamaica, where the historian Edward Long talked about Scots Heath, Culloden, and Archendon. If we look at slave inventories, we will see enslaved persons called Inverness, Scotland, and Sutherland. And today we have many surnames that are clearly of Scottish origin. I describe these as part of hidden stories. Our connections are so interwoven that we don't even realize that they're there. They're not mere coincidences. And there are similar examples all over the Caribbean. My question was, how do we reassemble the fragments? This led me to look at the fisheries, immigration, contemporary writers, plantation records, newspapers, advertisements, the things they covered, official records. Oral histories were very valuable of built landfill and our shared culture. And of course, there are the memories that live on in all of us. I met Gillian McIntyre in Trinidad and Tobago. She had a family Bible, which on the front is listed the ancestors coming from Scotland and going straight down to Trinidad. She has a family story from the 18th century, and her father insisted on how they should spell their last name. In piecing the puzzle back together again, I want to suggest that focus on the rich and the powerful, as exciting as it is, stuff movies are made of, hides the working class. We must be aware that there was poor record keeping. Many of the migrants lacked writing skills that didn't let leave written records. No official records were really required until much later in the 18th century. Sojourners, because they left intending to come back home, they often were not recorded. And if we think of the Highlands and the islands, there were no customs officers there. Therefore, it was easy for people to leave unnoticed and unrecorded. But when we look at the newspapers, we see arrivals and departures of ships coming from the West Indies. We see goods for sale. We see advertisement of employment opportunities in the West Indies. There's a section called Plantation News, talking about successful crops, however, sickness, diseases. There are announcements of marriages and deaths of people in the West Indies in Scottish newspapers. There are legislative journals and excerpts. There are letters from the colonies. There are ads for runaway enslaved persons and ads about sales of enslaved persons. This is just one of the many, many, many advertisements. This is a ship that is going to Dominica, to Jenny. And I have another example of an advertisement for someone to work in the West Indies, in the Leeward Islands, a cartwheel maker offering £12 sterling and an indentureship contract of 3 or 4 years. In terms of the scale of the movement, we have some academic estimates. I want to use the one from Stephen Mullen, who happens to be sitting with us this morning, and use this estimate that approximately 37,000 to 46,000 Scots sojourned in the West Indies between 1750 and 1834. We also can get an idea of the scale of the movement from other observers. Edward Long found that in Jamaica, 1/3 of the inhabitants came from the north of Britain. And there was Lady Maria Nugent, who simply said almost all the agents, attorneys, merchants, and shopkeepers are of that country. Going to the other side of the island, there's William Porter in Notch Bay, and he says that 3 or 4,000 persons quit Skye this year. And reports are equally unfavorable from every other quarter. He described immigration as a contagious epidemic. Now let's try to put into context what is going on. Why is this happening? Most of the migrants expressed a desire for independence, for economic independence. And where this coming from? It's very difficult times, especially in the Highlands and the Highlands. Alan Harris estimates that one-third of those who left Scotland for negative reasons came from the Highlands. There were changes in the traditional feudal economy as they moved towards a market economy. There were higher and monetary rent payments, the failure of crops, high cost of provisions, diseases. They were getting a wider experience. They were hearing about new ways of making money. Soldiers were returning home, new landlords were coming in. There were stories of a better life, stories of financial windfalls. Overall, it developed into a vision for a new future. And of course, by the time we get to the clearances in 1790, there is even a more direct push. Why the Caribbean islands? Why the West Indies? Well, sugar takes off. There's a sugar revolution. This creates spaces for agriculturals, semi-skilled and skilled workers. It creates spaces for professionals, doctors and lawyers. There's absenteeism. When planters make their money, they don't want to stay in the West Indies, they want to come home. But they need other people to manage their plantation. Army and naval officers come to the region. There's apprenticeship because there's need for laborers, forced and voluntary. There's kidnapping, there's forced migration, and there are settlement schemes. This leads to what I describe as shared island stories. There's active recruitment. There are recruitment agencies and there are recruitment officers. There are also family networks involved in recruiting people from their families and from their communities. This leads to land purchases in the long run. Some in the Scotland, some in the Caribbean, their purchases, their leases, their rentals, their improvements. In the West Indies, there are placement and support networks. Many people are coming to family, friends. They help them settle in. There are networks in the region to receive them. Remittances are sent home. Gifts are sent home. I am still amazed at what people would put on a ship. It still amazes me. And their inheritances left by people in the West Indies, people in Scotland. Their trade and commercial transactions. There's employment for governesses, tutors, boarding houses where people who come from the West Indies stay. I discovered in Inverness a cotton bagging industry employed women to create bags for the West Indies and their connections with the fishing industry. In the end, I think we developed what I call an institutional framework, which includes government settlement schemes. And when we look at institutions like the Tea and Royal Academy and the Royal Infirmary, and we look at their accounts, we see they get donations, sums of money from the West Indies. This is not the best, but I want you to show you a picture of the settlement scheme I found for Trinidad. This was a scheme to settle Highlanders who had worked in the army in Trinidad in 1803. I also wanted to share this. This is a list of land that was to be sold in the Highlands. It's the county of Inverness, and it identifies parcels of land in Inverness, Argyll, Mull, Perth, Ross, and so on. What's interesting is I found this in colonial office papers for Trinidad and Tobago with the material dealing with settlement. To me, it's a bit of a coincidence, to be a misfiling. There seems to be some kind of connection. Piecing back together a working class dimension emerges. Young men, sometimes as young as 13 or 14 years old, come to the West Indies. Many are from prior economic backgrounds, and in their own words, they want to make an independent living. What do? They generally go into two areas. What we call the planting line, starting at bookkeepers, advancing to overseers, and then to attorneys, or the mercantile line, starting as clerks and developing partnerships. In most cases, annual salaries were between £40 and £200. What was this new life like in the West Indies? They are the economic story, saving and working hard. Multiple jobs were held. They were very involved in enslavement and concentrated on sending remittances home. I posit that the West Indies had what I call a multiplier effect, and I talk about this more elsewhere. And this changes the picture. When we think about the first and we say, okay, you're coming and you're making £40 a year, we're surprised that you can send a remittance home. But they had multiple jobs. So you weren't just a bookkeeper, you had 4 bookkeeper positions. Slave ownership was extremely important. There was this desire to own property. Most could not dream about owning land, but you could own an enslaved person. So you have persons buying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 enslaved persons, and that is how they made additional money. Sometimes they form partnerships. If you have 5 friends, each of you own 5 enslaved persons, that's 25. You can hire that group out as a gang. Also consider that they lived on plantations, owned by planters who were absent in most cases. The plantation absorbed costs for accommodation and food. Plantation provided access to land, and the plantations hired their enslaved workers. And this is how they saved, and this is how they sent money home. There is a constant free stream of remittances sent back home. It tugs at your heartstring when you read the letters and the longing to be able to help your parents and your brothers and your sisters. Money went back to family members, creditors, boarding schools, governesses, investments, and savings. Sometimes it was as little as £10, and sometimes even this £10 had to be shared. In one instance, there was a mother and an aunt who collected £60 from someone in the West Indies with a son and a nephew, and they signed the receipts with their thumbs. In terms of social life, there is a longing for home. There is the development of the Scottish network, which is very intricate. There's the relationship with their family members, which we hear a lot about from their letters. There are the relationships with women, and there are children born in the Caribbean. Many of these young men have relationships with free, colored, and enslaved women. According to Charles Campbell, who was in the region, it is customary with the majority of overseers and bookkeepers in Jamaica to have a black or mulatto slave for their mistress, who they all familiarly call their wife. There were challenges. It's a difficult environment. There's stories about illnesses. There's stories about debt. There's stories about credit. There's stories about debt, the other debt. There are difficulties transferring money home. It's not all rosy picture of an easy life. But there are success stories. Some made fortunes. Some purchased property in the Caribbean and Scotland. Some returned home. For me, the most important one is that in many cases, there were improved lives on both sides of the Atlantic. I want to suggest, therefore, that in 2024, there's much need for refocusing, reassembling, and revising as we look at the past relationship between Scotland and the Caribbean. It is a difficult story. It is a difficult discussion, but it's a very rare reality that we must all face. I want to leave you with some reminders. One, this is a significant group, especially when we consider the size of the West Indies, we're not large, and the strategic positions that they were in. It was a group dominated by men. Their contributions, I think, have been underestimated and overlooked. There was a constant stream that did not stop from the 17th to the 19th century. I suggest they changed lives and they shaped communities in Scotland and the Caribbean. It is a story that goes beyond upper class success stories. Middle class, working classes, what I would call regular everyday people, played a very important role in the early modern era and in the age of revolution. The West Indies helped usher in a new development trajectory among the working classes, and this also adds a new dimension to the societies and groups who benefited from African enslavement.